Okay, so I'm going to go through some of the things we showed today really briefly and fast. So if you need to rewind, you can always pause and go back, okay? So I'm going to let's start with the Boolean functions, and this is an empty file. So make some boxes, right? You can type box or just click here on the box command and just make one big one, one medium one, and maybe one sort of more skinny but long one, like that. Okay? Now, making sure your gumballs here are on, right? Your object snaps are on, right? This is kind of basic setup. You can take this, right? I'm just going to use this to rotate and hold down the shift key to get it to snap to a 90-degree angle and maneuver it into position like that. So maybe I'll put the hole, right, the opening on that side. And this guy, I'm just actually just going to rotate an arbitrary angle and use this, right, where the sort of moving plane is to move it kind of 2D into here. And probably just move it so it's floating out there, something like that, okay? This really doesn't matter, it's just an exercise, okay? So, type Boolean. There's a lot of Boolean options, right? The first one we did was Boolean difference, and it will ask you what to subtract from. So you're subtracting from this, right? Enter or spacebar, subtract with, right? What are you subtracting with? And if your delete input is set to yes, once the command ends, like this will disappear, okay? So we're subtracting with this, enter, and basically it has cut out, right, using the object that you decided to cut with, okay? Now to see this next step better, you'll probably see it better in ghosted mode. So I'm switching to the ghosted view style. What you'll see is, yes, this box is intersecting into this box, right? Now, what the Boolean union command does is that it will join, right? And so you just run it and you select everything and say enter. It will literally kind of join those two. So the intersection has disappeared, but this has been kind of reconfigured as a single continuous polysurface, right? So that's the Boolean union. Now if I undo that by typing Control Z, then and let's kind of maybe find a more complex intersection between solid and void, maybe like that, right? So there's part of it that's looking at, oh, what is intersecting, parts is sort of like being cut out, okay? So this is the Boolean intersection. So Boolean intersection, it will ask you for a first set of surfaces or polysurfaces, right? Enter. Second set, enter, right? And essentially it will figure out between those two sets what is their overlap, right? It's like a overlap in a Venn diagram. This is geometrically what is their overlap. Okay, that's it. Those are the booleans. Really, really simple and easy. And just like kind of like how I had mentioned before, even if you kind of had, oh, let's say I'm activating my ortho. Let's say you had a series of walls, right? And we're kind of thinking about this in the context of the Miller house, right? Um, I'm going to take these guys and offset them. This curve, offset it a certain distance, right? And use the line command just to close everything and take it all, select it all, and join it. Okay. Um, I will extrude it in one direction and make sure it is set to solid, right? Like let's say these are walls of some sort. Switching back to shaded, right? These are walls, right? Not dissimilar to the walls that you will see in the Miller house. And say, let's say, oh, there's a door opening here, right? So what you can do, if you know the door dimensions, then you can draw this to the dimensions of the door. Let's say that's the door, okay? And we don't care about the width or the depth of it as long as it's larger than the wall section, right? I'm going to undo my ortho. And we can then for example, move, right? I can snap this to a specific location. I can move it, you know, a specific amount by using the arrows. So let's say, let's move it just like 3. Okay, so you know this is exactly its position in the plan, for example. That's the position of the doorway in the plan. So then you would just do a Boolean difference, take this, subtract it, you have your door. Your doorway, at least. Okay? So I think that's specifically with the Boolean sort of difference or subtraction, that's where it comes in really handy. All right. So here's the setup. You should have this. I'm actually just restarting this, so I will make a couple new layers by clicking here, new layer. So loft outer, and I will change the color just like today to orange. Okay. I'll make another new layer here. Loft inner, change the color to chartreuse, the bright green. Okay, I'll make it active when I do these commands. So double click here so the tick box or the check mark is next to it, right? So loft outer, and so the loft command, right? And I can, in my case, I can actually just get them all together by just doing that, right? The selection set from the lower right corner. And everything it crosses, it will select and just run the loft command, enter, enter, say OK, right? All right. Now, you have to get used to switching between layers and turning things on and off if it's in the way, right? Now I want to do my inner curves, but this is kind of in the way. So what you can do is shift your active layer to the inner layer, right? And then use this, the layer visibility, to turn off temporarily that orange layer, right? And that will allow me to be able to select by holding down the shift key and clicking to select these in a sequence, right? Now, when you have things pre-selected, you can also run the loft command off of that directly and do this. But you'll see I'm also kind of getting some weird pinches, right? So what I can do is to run the loft command first, then go through and click it sequentially. And usually that will get them to align a little bit better. We haven't got into adjusting these seam lines, but you know, for now, this is fine. And if it does do that, then you can kind of move it around or try to redo it. But I think for now, I wouldn't worry too much about it just yet. Okay, just say okay. All right, so there's something in there, and we can activate the orange curve back, and so it should look something like that. Okay. Now, if any of you guys have like straight section curves, or you did your lofts like from one to one individually, I suggested doing this way, just like doing them all together, right? Don't do them in individual sections. You should have ideally some sort of like, you know, bigger outer shell that looks like that. Okay. All right. So one command that we showed today was the split command. Okay. So for that we need a plane. So I'm just going to put in a plane. And you can probably switch back to your default layer for this, just so it doesn't, you know, you don't get your objects confused on different layers. Just to make sure it's bigger than whatever you're going to cut through. So something like that, right? I am just kind of moving it up here and using these grips, just rotating it at a certain angle. And you can actually rotate on, you know, 2 angles if you want to get fancy with it. Okay? And type split. Oh, sorry. Just type split into the dialog box, right? Select object to split. So we're going to split this orange thing and the green thing, right? So that's how you should be highlighting. Enter. Select cutting object. So we're cutting with the plane, right? So press enter when done. Now, after it's done, you can actually just delete this, right? But you'll see the top parts of these have been cut off, right? So now I can actually just select all this stuff, right, and move it up, right? Now I didn't get that blue thing that's floating there, so I'll undo it, right? And I can kind of do a boundary crossing selection like that, right? And you'll have to decide, because like this red layer actually spans in between the 2 sections, so I might actually just deselect this and that, and move it up, let's say 5. Oh, too much. Undo, let's say 2, right? Okay. So that was the split with the plane, okay? Now make another box, make it smaller, something like this, okay? Move it in, pick a section of it, right? And actually I'm gonna base this off of my view. So you should have saved a named view here somewhere, right? So if I click on named view, this is my named view, or my personal, sort of like my preset view that I saved earlier. As you can see, because I moved things up, right now things are kind of, oh, this is sort of in the way, okay? So what I can do is kind of reset this view, right? So using this as the guide, I'll just kind of zoom out a little bit, recenter it. This is actually kind of in the way. So maybe I actually want to do it this direction, right? So I can kind of see the two objects a little bit better. They're not overlapping, right? This is kind of the thing you're kind of looking at when you're doing this, all right? Okay, so let's say now I want to save this view. I can either save a new one, set view, go to the name views, right? Pull this out, dialog box out. And I can save a new one, or I can like click on this one, the one I had saved before, and update it by just saying save as, right? And just don't change it, and it would say, oh, do you want to replace it? Say yes. Okay, that just actually just updates it, right? So now this is the great view. Okay, split. Okay, object to split this orange thing down here. I'm not splitting the green one on this one, although if you wanted to, you could, depending on how much of the box is actually intersecting with it. But for now, I'm just doing the orange one, okay? Press enter, and then select cutting objects, which in this case is the box, right? You just have to make sure it is fully intersecting with it, right? Say enter, okay? Delete this guy. Okay, that was the, if I try to look at it straight on, right, this is basically the sort of box outline, right, where it was intersecting with it, okay? So we can pull it out a certain amount, right? Maintain that axial relationship with it, okay? And then just draw lines, so line, snapping to the corners, right? Same thing here, same thing down here, right? And I'm just using the right click, right mouse button to repeat the last command very quickly. This one actually is a bit tricky because I think, okay, so yeah, you might want to position your box a little bit better than mine to avoid like some weird awkward cutout corners, right? But this basically is a sort of idea of like, oh, those are the lines that are from where it pulls out, right? And exposes a little bit of the inner kind of shell or inner green stuff to for you to see. All right, so let's reset that view and take a look at it. All right, that looks pretty decent. All right, so now let's actually get the image export out of this first, right? So I'm going to switch to my rendered view, which should look like this, right? I don't have any materials applied, so it looks white, right? It's just a simple white clear render, right? Now, I could go through and, you know, kind of, for example, if you have things sorted, you could just like go through and kind of close, for example, your lines out, right? Let's say your sort of section lines to hide them, okay? Sometimes like these curves or these surfaces, right, depending on how your view settings are. Yours probably won't have these outlines, but mine do. It's okay for now, right? The display options, right, for this, for example, will also kind of show whether or not the edges of things and surfaces show up or not. So that's kind of right here. If I bump this to 0, then those like lines in my sort of rendered view then disappear. Okay, so that's actually how you get those like little colored lines on the edges of surfaces, right? That has to be activated. So yours actually should look a bit more like this, right? Okay. View capture to file, right? And if you have curves in here that you don't want, right? It's like these, right? Or you have other curves, you know, that are kind of, you know, you want to turn off temporarily. This thing here, these are like the selection sort of sets, okay? One of them is actually this guy, select curves. Okay, so it selects all the curves that are left over in the scene, right? So you can do that, or you can just type SELCRV, select curve, right? Which selects that, and I will just hide it by using the hide command, hide, just to make it go away temporarily, right? Okay, so view, capture to file, right? Viewport, I'll make this 3 times the scale of the viewport. Okay. So 422460, something like that. These settings should be like that. Say OK. And I will save it. So call it background.jpg, JPEG, save. Right? It'll run for a little bit, but eventually you should get a background image that looks like that. Okay? All right. All right, let's switch back to shaded, right? Now all my curves are gone, so you have to type show, S-H-O-W, to bring some of these curves back, and or, in my case, reactivate your outer inner curves, right? Your slices should still be there, but I had them turned off earlier, doesn't matter, right? Okay, so for this, right, without moving your view, right, don't shift your view, right, make sure it's still set to this great view, this angle, like nothing changes, okay? Without shifting it, you can basically select all this, right, and run the Make2D command. So Make2D, which makes a flat drawing out of something, okay? Have the hidden lines selected. Make sure you have your viewport rectangle selected, right? So basically, kind of these 3 group output, these 3 selections, right? Okay, and just say okay. It will run a little bit, and actually, as Jamie said, it's a good idea sometimes to actually save it beforehand, right? So now you will see this pop up in your top view, right, or on the XY plane. Switch to your top view. My top view, switch back to shaded. Okay, so now you will see everything that was hidden, right, is grouped. Everything that's kind of hidden or behind something is grouped in one layer that's called hidden, right? So these are the hidden lines, right? Things behind things, and things that are visible, right? So it's actually done it pretty much like automatically for you. And these lines, right? The lines that we drew pulling things out, right? These are also there. They're also grouped by color, right? So green, orange, right? This is all basically a vector line drawing, right? Select everything in this view. Make sure it's the top view, right? File, export selected, okay? Let me save it in the right place. Okay, so pepper make 2D, right? Call it something. And here, make sure you're saving it as an Adobe Illustrator file in the save as type. Okay, so it should be an AI file. Okay, save. In there, you don't need to change any of this. Okay, just say okay. These should be pretty much default. All right. Okay. Now you will get an AI file, an Illustrator file, wherever you saved it. And if you open it in Illustrator, it should look like this, right? So double click it, run Illustrator. Illustrator should open it right here. Okay. All right. Now, this is the vector kind of flat 2D drawing that we had, and we are going to composite it with this background JPEG, right? All right. So one thing usually I will actually do right off the bat, as soon as I open this, is actually to try to make the document a little bit bigger. So you go to File, Document Setup, right? Edit Artboards up here, all right? And you can kind of zoom out a little bit. You Control 0 or Control minus, right? Control minus to zoom out. Width 17 in, okay, and then height 11 in. Okay, that should kind of reset the artboard to the right side. Just say OK or escape out of it, and essentially that makes the board a lot sort of bigger, right? Use the spacebar to pan, right? Um, and Control plus to zoom in, Control minus to zoom out, right? Control 0 basically centers it to kind of like the larger screen size, right? So now this should be kind of set to 11 by 17 page format, okay? Um, so you can select things like this, similar to how you select things in Rhino, okay? A couple of things we'll be using here. Here are the layers, right? These layers are actually similar to how the Make2D made the layers in Rhino. So you'll see some are hidden lines if I toggle this visibility on and off, right? This is a visible line, and this is the outer sort of boundary. Okay, so simple enough, right? Now, I actually am going to make a new layer here by creating a new layer, right? This new layer, I'm actually going to drag it to the very bottom. Just drag and click, drag and let go, right? Click, drag. And this is the layer that we are, make sure it's active or highlighted. So layer 4, right? We can actually give it a name, call it background image, right? Okay, all right. Now, we'll place, right? File and place that background image. So to go find it again. Classes, D2, Rhino tutorial. Okay, so the background image that we were working with earlier. Okay, so we'll place that. Oh, it's huge, right? It's really, really big. Okay, so grab the corner, hold down your shift key to scale it uniformly, right? Don't do a non-uniform scale. If you don't do a uniform scale, it will do this and you'll change the pixel dimensions, right? So hold down the shift key to make sure it's scaling uniformly. Zoom back in, okay? Right, now, because this was inserted on this very bottom layer, like everything else is kind of like above it, right? Okay, so that's helpful. And I'm just actually just gonna kind of make it pretty big. And same thing, kind of scale it back up roughly to my extents. Doesn't really matter. Okay, and if I'm happy with the placement of it, right, just deselect it, right? You can double click on the layer just to lock it. Okay, if it's locked, then now selecting that background image won't kind of like, I won't select it accidentally. Okay, now I want to select everything that I had earlier, and basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to kind of match up the corners. And so if you get close, you kind of have to remember where that corner was, but if you get close, you'll see it should snap natively or automatically, right? So once you get one corner, hold down the shift key, scale it, and try to find the other corner, right? And when you get there, then the edges of your curves and the background drawing should line up pretty much perfectly, right? Exactly just like how it was. Okay? Now, you might ask, well, we kind of had a similar output from there, but this basically kind of gives you much finer level control over lines and line weights. Okay, so I'm going to go a little bit further and say, okay, well, you can kind of just select these all, right? All of these, and go here to your line weights stroke control, right? And you'll see that these are sort of 1 point lines right now, right? If I change this to, let's say, 2, then all my line weights get fatter, right? They get a lot thicker, right? So you can actually, this is a really good way to actually control line weights and multiple different line weights, okay? And one of the things you'll notice, for example, is that now when I'm selecting things, they're all kind of individual lines, right? So sometimes actually a good thing is to say, well, let's select lines with the same kind of line types or colors, okay? So for example, I will highlight, and actually this grid outside kind of frame, you can delete it. It should go away. So I'll select this like orange thing right here, okay, this orange line for example, okay. I will select, so go to select, okay, same stroke color, okay. So what that does, it's a selection set that selects like everything that was on those orange layers, right? So anything that was like more associated with that outer shell, okay. So, or for example, select this orange thing, select same, right? Stroke weight or color. I think we'll just do color for now, right? For now, it's probably easier. So this, right? Now, I will use the group command or Control G to group them all together, which means at this point, if I select them, they are all together now, right? On Control Z to undo, all right? I can select all the red stuff, right? So select same stroke color, everything that's red, Control G, and then for example, everything that's blue, select same stroke color, Control G, everything that's green. So this shows you what you're selecting, right? Same stroke color, Control G. Okay, so that just makes my selecting things a bit easier, right? Like the right things, similar things are on the same layer. And so, for example, this inner surface, right, then I can come in and say, oh, I really don't want it to be 2 points. I want it to be, you can do this pull down. This is like, you know, maybe 0.5. This orange stuff, let's do 0.75. So it's a little bit kind of, you know, more delicate. These red lines, 0.25, so they're almost kind of disappearing, fading away. The blue lines, you know, somewhere in between 0.5, right? So you can actually just really easily kind of take the line work, right? Here, I have a couple of black lines, right? So I'm zooming in. So same thing, select same stroke color, Control G, okay? Make these like 0.5, right? These are kind of thinner lines of this surface pulling off, right? Now the other cool thing about this is that these are, let's say I really want these to be dashed lines, okay? So here you can actually set if they're dash lines and what their dash intervals are, right? So dash, gap, that sort of thing. So let's see, let's do a 6-2 dash. And if I zoom in, you will see that's a 6-2 dash, 2-point gap, right? So that might be actually too big. So let's do a 4-2. Oh, have it select it and change it. A 4-2 dash. Okay, so you see the dash a little bit better, right? If you're not happy about you know, that sort of color or things like that, then we'll get into kind of changing the colors and things. But for now, you know, you can kind of basically change these things. Or if you want the gap to be bigger, you know, you can do, let's say, a 9-3, which makes it a much bigger sort of dash line. Okay, so you know, you can actually really use this as a way to really specify. It gives you much finer degree and control over, right, the sort of line weights, right, what you want to emphasize, what you don't want to emphasize. If you kind of want to push things toward the bottom, right, then all this sort of layer control is something that you can kind of use. You can make new layers to put things on, right, and then you can actually use the sort of layer control in here, right, to sort of change their properties as well, right? So this will be super useful and helpful eventually when we kind of get to things that are related to Photoshop. Sorry, to diagrams, diagramming the Miller house, right? You will have to learn how to kind of export things, pull things to the side, right? Working eventually with the digital Rhino model to kind of show how geometries relate or color things in, okay? So I think that's it. Hope that was helpful.